Fire away.
I'm ready.
All right.
I just wish that I could remember where I left off last time, what I was talking about.
Last time we did pretty much all of your summer of 55.
When I was up in Washington on the lookout.
You did the lookout, that's right.
The trip out there, the trip back.
Getting the
Yellowstone.
The spaghetti that was supposed to be
So wonderful. Yeah, oh, that was awful.
Yep.
That was awful. Well, it's Christmas time. I think I'd like to talk about Elizabeth, because Christmas is there. Well, Elizabeth was somewhat like Mayberry. It was one of those places. It was so gentle and so family and so safe and so much fun. It's hard for people today to realize that if you weren't raised in a place like that, that it's possible, because it was just a wonderful place. As kids, we ran the streets at night playing games, Go Sheepy Go, things like that. We'd go for 2 or 3 blocks. You couldn't get lost because everybody knew you. And if you got into trouble, they'd help you out or they'd send you home if you did something you weren't supposed to. But it was just a good place. We had one store, Finke Stores. Mr. A.B. Finke established it at about the time that Elizabeth came into being, which was in the early 1900s, I think 1903, maybe 4. But he and his family came down from Minnesota after they came to this country. And they settled several different places because he wanted a place to put in a mercantile store. And I don't know why he picked Elizabeth, but he did. I don't know how many places they stopped and tried before they got there. But anyway, once he got there, there was a sawmill there. I don't believe the paper mill was there at that time, but the sawmill was there. And so he built this store with the lumber that was milled at that sawmill. I couldn't estimate the square footage, but it was a big building. It had everything that you could possibly want. Groceries, had a drugstore, so you had your medicines. It had a ladies department, it had a men's department, it had a clothing department, toy department, candy department. It was just wonderful. You'd walk in the front door of that building, and when you walked in, to the left was a staircase, big, wide staircase. As a kid, it seemed like it went nearly to heaven, but there was no elevator. I don't imagine anybody in town knew there was such a thing as an escalator, if they had them in New York by then, which I'm sure they did, or somewhere. But you walked up those stairs and you were in the women's department. Beautiful clothes, beautiful clothes. No 2 dresses were alike. Don't see that now? That would be great. No 2 dresses were alike, but I never had one till I was 16. Bought my first ready-made dress when I was 16. I'd gone to work in the drugstore, so I saved my money, and the dress cost $18. That was expensive. Beautiful dress, iridescent taffeta. Oh Lordy, oh man, I was so pretty in that thing, I thought. Also up there in that department, they had a hat department, and when we were little, we'd go up there, and Miss Hattie, who was the sister of Mr. Finke, who established the store, she let us try on the hats. And so that's what we do. We'd go up there. When she wasn't busy, we could try on hats. And there was a lady up there, Mrs. Simmons. She was the main person to sell you something. And there's Miss Frances. she was a seamstress that if it didn't fit properly, she fixed it for you. All free of charge, thank you very much. And then you came down the stairs and you turned left, and there was a part there that was like materials and dry good things. And then you went on further, and then there was a men's department. And they had everything from underwear to fancy suits, plus shoes. And Mr. Horace Turner lived in Fairview, drove in every day, all 9 miles, in a Model A to man the men's department. I don't know that he ever worked anywhere else, because he was still there when Finke's stores finally went out of business. Back toward the back was the meat market and the grocery store. There was a table-high counter that went the whole way, and you stepped up there, and someone came and said, "What can I get for you? What your mama want?" Bobbye said, "She wants a can of peas and some this or that or the other," and they'd go get it and bring it and write out your ticket and put it in the sack for you, and you'd take it home. There was the hardware department way over on the right-hand side, down the other side. The hardware department, fully stocked, nails, hammers, all kind of hardware. And they had an outbuilding, and it had, of all things in it, funeral supplies. Things for which to embalm. Now, I don't know that anybody did their own embalming, but I was told that that's the kind of things that they had there. And you could also get your own tombstone if you want to get it early, and they could order you caskets. And then further down the road from that was an ice house. They made ice. And we loved to go down there in the summertime because it was hot, and we would go visit Mr. Chamberlain, because he's the one that always ran the ice house. And nobody had air conditioning, so it was really a pretty cool job, literally. And we'd go down there and visit him. Next door to the big store was a drugstore, and it had booths and had the little round tables for little people to sit at, 3- and 4-year-olds. Had a real soda fountain in back, ice cream and everything. That's where I had my first job when I was 15, worked at the soda fountain. And most probably every romance in that town was recorded in those booths back there with carved initials and things like that. No graffiti that anybody had to wash off or get rid of because it was offensive. Another good thing, another real good thing. But I was thinking about Christmas when I started talking about this. Every year, Mr. Finke brought in lots and lots and lots of extra toys. And around the top of this building was a balcony. I would say it most probably was 12 or 15 feet wide, and it went all the way around. And things were stored up there. And at Christmas time, the men that worked, by this time the paper mill was there because I was born during the time of the paper mill, and I remember all of this. But the men from the paper mill would come, and they would buy the Santa Claus, all of that, and it would be wrapped up and stored up there in that balcony. And Finke's stores closed on the weekends at 9 o'clock. It closed about 6 during the week. But at Christmas time, on Christmas Eve, it stayed open. I guess if somebody had to come at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was still open because it stayed open until everybody could get there and get their Santa Claus to take home. And it was exciting to go up there. Of course, we didn't see any of the Santa Claus leaving. We just knew the store was open and everybody was having a good time. I remember one of the things about the Christmas time and Santa Claus and being able to buy Santa Claus, because every year, I guess it was pyracantha, I'm not sure, but all the guys called it the bonus berries, because when the berries came on the bush, pyracantha or whatever it was, that was the time that they found out if they got a bonus. And at that time, they got really good ones sometime if the mule had a good year. Every now and then they didn't get one. That was kind of a sad time, because everybody waited for the bonus berries to bloom or to be, so that they know that they get their money if they were going to. I remember that, and how much fun it was, because the kids were everywhere. Nobody was up or in the balcony where all the good stuff was, but that's the way that Christmas came down there. Christmas trees everywhere. You could cut your own then. Nobody had a store-bought. Everybody went out and cut a pine tree on the industrial land, and that was okay. You didn't have to have a permit. All you needed was a saw, and you go get you a pine tree.
They were usually all really ugly.
Yeah, they were pretty ugly. I remember my dad, he would cut one that we picked out, and then he would cut another one because Mama would make him put extra limbs in there to fill up the holes. And so our trees looked fairly decent most of the time, but it took one big one and one little one.
In varying stages.
Yeah. Well, you always made the pretty side stick out. Next to the drugstore, this whole complex was, if you'd call it I guess you'd call it a complex. It was built by Mr. Finke, and next to the drugstore was some stairs. Just a door there, and you went up those stairs, and up there was a telephone office and a dentist office. Dr. Isles was the dentist.
The morgue was up there one time, wasn't it?
The what?
The morgue. The undertaker was up there.
Well, I don't remember him. I don't remember that part. I remember the funeral supplies, the part of the store that had that, but I don't remember the morgue. But anyway.
The undertaker. Well, they had coffins up there.
Yeah.
You could buy a coffin up there.
And but the telephone office was up there, which was the central area of the whole town. I mean, all information went through there. You cranked the phone, and Molly or somebody would say, "What number do you want, honey?" "I'm calling my Aunt Snooks." "Well, your mama's not down there. I just saw her go down 300. She's most probably at your Aunt Fritz's. You want me to ring down there?" "Yes, ma'am." And so she'd call down there. She knew where everybody was, because she sat up there and plugged in that keyboard every day, all day long, and watched the traffic go by. There was just this one street that went down on that part of town. It was Front Street, and off of Front Street were 6 other streets.
200.
100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and 600. And then going angling past 600 was 700. And going off of First Street, 100th Street, was Hospital Row. And then down at the other end of town by the Industrial Lumber Company offices was Industrial Drive. And then going off of that was a railroad spur called Mab. went down into the woods where this little community was, and there's a railroad spur went down there, and I don't know why it went down there, but that's where Mab was anyway. And that was the, there was one other little section that went Turpentine Road, where the turpentine mill was. And I believe that was all of them, as far as I know.
What about the quarters?
There were 2 quarters for the black folks, and one was up toward the paper mill. The other one was on down on the other side of town. The one by the paper mill was called mill quarters, and I don't remember what the other one was called at all. But it was on the other side of town. They had their own hotel, like the white section of town had, and they had their own school. We had the hospital. Well, I got off of what was down in the, Mr. Finke's store. We went upstairs to the, the telephone office and talked about that, but then you came downstairs, and underneath that part that held the telephone office and the dentist office and the morgue maybe was the barbershop, and also a back room that had pool tables in it. Oh mercy. Was a bane of some people's existence, the pool hall. And then next door to that was the post office. And past the post office, I believe that was the last building that complex encompassed.
Well, kind of more like a strip mall.
Well, it was a strip mall. It would be called a strip mall now, but it held all these all the things that were necessary for this town. Mr. Finke's office was right in the middle of the store. It was maybe it wasn't 20 feet square. Maybe 15 feet square. And the walls around it were about 5 foot high. And you took, well, it was about 5 foot high after you went up 2 steps. But it was totally open. He was just sitting right there in the middle of everything, and you could go up there anytime and talk to him if you wanted to, kids and grown folks alike. And all business was conducted there. You didn't have to have an appointment. When I remember, I had a friend, her name was Virginia Ratton, and her dad worked in the grocery department. First thing about Joe is he had lost 3 fingers, these 3. And he could tie a string with his little finger and his thumb when he was wrapping up packages, for stuff, meat and stuff that you're taking out. He could tie, and I watched him, and I never could learn to do it. But I'd try, because it fascinated me how quick he could do that with those 2 fingers.
How did he lose them?
Huh?
How did he lose them?
I don't know how he lost them. I don't remember that, but he did. He didn't have them. And he could tie those strings.
You remember I used to park my horse there?
Yes, I remember. One day, I got a phone call. And what was the barber's name at that time? He said, "Bobbye Sue, you gotta come get Ross." I said, "What's he done?" He said he hadn't done anything, but he tied his horse to the barber pole on the concrete, and they didn't really want the horse to have an accident there and them have to clean up. So I had to go to town and tell Ross, don't do that anymore. So then the next time I got a call, they said, "You really need to tell him not to tie his horse to the stop signs." that is not a good place. But he did. And
finally, I had to move my horse across the street to the park. Tied to the swing set.
Life was easy. Life was easy there. We had so much fun. It was exciting. When the war started, we had Camp Livingston, Camp Claiborne, and Camp Polk, all three within 50 miles or less of Elizabeth. And I don't know why, but all of them, I guess it was because we were out in the woods so isolated, that all of the camps held their maneuvers in that area. And so we constantly had convoys coming through. And it was always, oh, that was exciting when the convoys came through. Every house had a no wooden rail fence around it, and we'd sit on those fences and waved to all the soldier boys as they came by. And quite a number of romances started there because they'd throw their address to these girls that were old enough for that sort of thing, and they start writing to them, and then when they get a chance, they'd come. And then the girls that were old enough would go to Camp Polk to the dances, and next thing you know, they'd be coming down there to date them, and then a few of them even got married. So that was not. That also brought on another thing, though, because the town was so small, you knew everybody. And at that time, if someone in the service died, the notification, nobody came, no group of people or anything like that came to tell you about it. It came in a telegraph, in a telegram. And the man that ran the telegraph office, he would have to take the telegram to the people. And I remember one Sunday morning, we got in that little town 3 telegrams. Now, if you think that doesn't do something to a small town like that, when you lose 3 in one day, I'll never forget that, because the whole town was in deep mourning. It was just a horrible, horrible thing.
Okay, I'll be there in a bit.
Most everything, though, was just peaceful and fun, safe, simple. When we got a lunchroom at school, that was a big thing. Oh, mercy. We didn't have to go home at lunch. We got a lunchroom at school, and you hear the kids today talk about, oh, the food's awful, and well, some of it is because I've eaten at a few of them, and it's not very good. But then it was good because our mamas were the cooks. And we knew on certain days somebody would make this. Oh, that's good. We had the fresh rolls. We knew who made the fresh rolls. My Aunt Fritzie, she always made cobbler. On the day that she was going to make cobbler, everybody loved. Every day had something special that one of those mamas made. And the food was wonderful. We had butter. We got, what did they call that? Commodities. It was during the war, some of it, and you didn't have any butter, you didn't have any coffee, you had rationed stamps and all that, but commodities, you got real butter and real cheese, lots and lots of cheese, excuse me, and just all this good stuff. And when you made, the lady that made the rolls that were so good, we had that real butter with them. Oh man, that was wonderful. That, just put just gobs and gobs of that butter on there. And I wish I could convey the simple, safe, sweet spirit that was about that town. Oh, everybody was good and bad things happened. but not like now. Not. It just, and I never, ever felt unsafe. Never was scared about anything or anybody. In fact, my best friend lived 1 mile on one side of town, and when my daddy built our house, I was a mile on the other side. And we were teenage girls, and we spent most all nights together because she had lost her mother, and she kind of adopted my mom. And we could go to the movie, and whichever house we were staying at that particular time, we just walked home. There were not any lighted highways or anything else. We just walked home. And our parents weren't concerned about us because it was okay. Nobody was going to hurt us in any way. In fact, most of the time we didn't have to walk the whole way because somebody'd come along, we'd get in the car with them and they'd take us home. We knew them, and it was all right. And I remember not being late for school because if I didn't catch the bus, I had to walk because Mama said, no way, or am I going to take you to school when you just won't get up and get yourself ready? So Mr. McDaniel, he was a real kind soul. He had to come out of one road, turn right, and go about a half a mile up to pick up some kids. So when he came out of that road, turning right, he would honk his horn. And I would hear it, and I know I had about 4 minutes to get finished and get out there so I didn't have to walk to school. So he saved me more mornings than I could count, and I didn't have to hook it to school 1 foot at a time. But I learned, I don't think I ever went to school with my hair combed. I combed it on the bus. It was okay. Things, we weren't as concerned then about looks and dress because, in fact, we could wear jeans to school all my life. I don't think I might have worn a dress, I don't know, but I don't ever remember it. And another thing, we could also go barefoot. We went barefoot to school anytime the weather was warm. Some kids went barefoot when it was cold because there were a lot of kids in that school that really they just didn't have very much. So they had to go barefoot sometime, I imagine, when they wished they didn't. And that was sad. I can remember realizing that because I saw some of them sometime wearing shoes that were much too big and wearing shoes that were long since worn out. But that's just the way it was. That was not good. But they made it. I've seen them since, and it didn't warp them or anything else. They came out of it, and they went on and got their education and got good jobs, and things were better practically for every one of them that I remember being, not having some of the things that I had. And I didn't have much. I didn't know I didn't have much because we were all just alike. So, you know, nobody was rich. Most of our daddies worked at the paper mill or the sawmill, and so we did not know any level. Well, there just weren't levels. We were just all a bunch of kids, and we went to school together, and we were, if there was a level of society or something, we were unaware of it. One of the funniest things I can remember growing up, my mom and dad built a house, like I said, a mile out of town. And I was 13 years old. Oh, Lordy. I thought, well, this is the end of me. I'm going to be way out of town there. No, I'll never see anybody again. I'll never have a boyfriend. anything else, you know. It was awful. It was awful. I was so upset. Well, what happened was the kids like to come out there because we have bonfires, and Daddy built us a big old picnic table and everything, and the kids came out there all the time. It was wonderful. So I got over that. And then we built a clubhouse down in the woods. It was a strip of trees and brush and stuff between us and the highway. I would say it was most probably acre and a half in distance through there. And we built a clubhouse, and we built bunks in it. And so me and my girlfriends, we would go down there on the weekend, and we would spend the night. Now, you couldn't do that now. Perfectly safe. We had more fun. When my brother got old enough, and this is the incident that I remember that was so hilarious. He and a bunch of his buddies, and they were about 12 years old at this time, and they were going to spend the night down there. Which they were down there. And I had a girlfriend that came to spend the night with me, and her name was Ramona. And it was wintertime, or it was cold, because we both had on flannel gowns, which was a yoke across here that this big old thing was, you know, sewn to, down to your ankles, and big old sleeves and whatever. And so that's what we had on when we decided to go down and scare the kids that were down in the little clubhouse.
How old were you compared to them?
I was most probably, let's see, Nelson was about 12, so I would have been between 15 and 16.
Okay.
So we go down there. Well, we scare them. But then what they're doing is getting up on top of the clubhouse and jumping off onto a pine tree and riding it to the ground. Okay, nothing would do them but for us to do that. Well, we've done that before. So we get up there. Well, I sail off first, and I get down, and I turn around just in time to see Ramona leap for the tree. And when she did, the tail of her gown caught on a nail. And it unraveled her gown, and when she got to the ground, she had on a yoke and 2 sleeves, and a pair of panties, and that was all. And those boys' eyes about popped out of their heads. I laughed. She ran. We ran as hard as we could back to the house, but I was laughing so hard I could hardly run. And I had to go in the house and get something to wrap around her before she could go in the house. We never did go back and get the bottom part of her nightgown. But those boys, they sure had a story to tell, but I will never forget watching that gown go, and there she is. She was a pretty girl, had a nice figure. Those boys didn't lose that fact on them at all. But it was funny. The biggest thing that took place in the whole history of Elizabeth, though, was during the war, and a bomber crash landed right outside of town. And it's a big airplane. And before you could say scat Tom, the military was in there, and they had it cordoned off, and you couldn't get up close to it or anything else. But everybody in town was out there looking at it. Oh, it was huge. Of course, anything was huge at that time, because it was approximately during that time that I saw my first airplane. I wasn't, let's see, when the war started, I was 7 years old. And
What year is that roughly? What year was that?
1941. And I was 7 years old, and all the houses in Elizabeth, then this is a disjointed statement, but all the houses in Elizabeth were built up off the ground. Just on brick piers, you know. And like I said, we had no air conditioning. You had wood heat in the winter, but the kids in the summer played under the houses because it was cooler under there in the shade. And my cousin and I were playing under the house. We were at his house, and it was higher off the ground than my house. So we could, you know, we could move around under there and build our cities and our roads and everything better under there than at my house. And we're under there one day, and we hear this roaring sound. And so we go out to the edge of the porch, and we're crawling out from under the house, trying to see what the roaring's about, when I guess it would have been what you would call a Piper Cub, but a small little airplane came right over the top of the tree, right across the road from where we were, low, and just came roaring over the top of that tree. Well, when it did, we both dove from back under the house because it scared us to death. Well, Donnelly was always prone to hurt himself. He knocked himself out colder than a turkey. When he dove, he just rose up and dove back and blammed his head and just lay there kicking because he just about killed himself. Scared us both terribly bad. That was my first airplane, and that was during the war also. So I was at least 7 or 8 years old before I saw one. I also remember the first helicopter that I ever saw. Mom and Daddy had built their house outside of town, so I was older than 13. And I had come in from school, and all of a sudden I heard this terrible noise, and the weather was bad, and I thought it was a tornado. Scared me very much so, because I'm scared to death of tornadoes. But I ran to the window to look out, and just as I did, the helicopter cleared the house and was out in front of me, so where I could see it. So I remember that. Of course, I remember when man went to the moon too. I remember my first airplane ride. Bill, and this was after I was married, and Bill and I were flying to Missouri, and we got on the plane in Alexandria, and I was all excited. I mean, I was enjoying it, and I got just real settled down and was looking out the window and everything, and the pilot comes on and said, "Fasten your seatbelts for landing." I said, "What's wrong, Bill?" He said, "Well, nothing's wrong. We're landing in Memphis." I said, "No way. You're crazy. We can't be in Memphis already." Well, we were in Memphis. But when we landed in Memphis, you could get off the plane then in between flights, and when we got there, all of a sudden there were people everywhere, and they were coming on the plane, and everything was all there, and there were police cars and soldiers and stuff everywhere around the plane. I said, "See, I told you something's wrong." Well, it was. Martin Luther King had been shot, and the man that was by him when he was shot, and I cannot remember his name, they were putting him on that flight. I suppose we were headed to St. Louis, so I suppose he was going to St. Louis and then to Washington or something. But that was pretty memorable too. And then, of course, the first space flight, that was scary because everybody was just so afraid it wasn't going to fly. But it did. And that's all the big first that I can remember but to me that's all pretty exciting to have gone from a Piper cub that scared me to death to a man going on the moon. And that was not, I mean, that was years ago. It didn't take all my years for all of that to happen. And to have experienced that many things in just one short lifetime makes me wonder what the next 84 is going to bring. I remember reading the funny papers in Flash Gordon. He was a space traveler. He had this backpack thing he'd put on and he could fly around. And my daddy would read me the funny papers every Sunday morning. And that was just one of the best things, you know, one of the best comics of the whole thing. And it was just so far-fetched. Just wouldn't that be something? Yeah. Who's going to ever be able to do that? You couldn't. How could you get off the ground and land without killing yourself? You know. Well, they passed that up so long ago that it's not even funny. But it was an unbelievable thing that happened so quick, and it's going to keep on happening. I don't know how many more exciting things I'll be here to experience, but all you fellers that are left for a long time, it's going to be something to see, I'll tell you that for sure. But I just, being raised in Elizabeth was a sweet time. It was a good life. It was so good. I think most probably my generation was the last one to be able to live there and grow up and experience the whole process of growing up. My children lived there for a short time, and even in that short time that they lived there, they both have said that they wished that they could have taken their kids there and let them be raised there like it was when I grew up, and like it was that short time that they were there. So it was still good then. It's deteriorated now. The paper mill's gone, the lumber company's gone, the sawmill's gone. So the remnants of the town are there, but it's not very pretty anymore, and it's not very good anymore, but it's still home. It's still Elizabeth. Wish you could see it. Wish you could experience it. Wish you could know what it really was like. Everybody should have that chance, because I think every one of you would have enjoyed it. I know I did. I wouldn't mind growing up again, very same place, doing the very same things. But don't guess that's going to happen.